Ashton leaned back in his leather chair, swirling amber liquid in a crystal tumbler that caught the chandelier's light like fire. "You wouldn't last a week without me, Mila," he said with that smug grin I used to mistake for confidence. "Without my money, my name, my connections, you'd be nothing. Just another pretty face waiting tables." He straightened his tie, fully expecting me to beg. But instead, I reached into my Chanel bag, pulled out the keys, house, Range Rover, safe, and laid them neatly on the granite counter. Each one landed with a sharp click that echoed like punctuation. "You're right," I said softly. "Let's find out." His face drained of color as I turned and walked away, leaving behind every luxury he thought defined me. That was 3 hours ago. Now I sat in the marble lobby of the Ritz-Carlton, watching live security footage from our penthouse. Ashton was pacing, phone pressed to his ear, picking up my keys, setting them down, calling someone. Probably his father. Maybe his partner Nathan. Certainly not the police. What could he say? "My wife walked out?" "Miss Hawthorne," the concierge said gently. "Your suite is ready." It felt strange to hear my maiden name again. I'd used it when I made the reservation that morning. Paid in full with my own funds. 6 figures I'd quietly grown from the allowance Ashton gave me years ago. He'd laughed at parties, telling people I played with stocks like other wives played tennis. No one knew that my hobby in day trading had multiplied his initial $10,000 into enough to last me years. The suite was smaller than the penthouse, but it felt bigger, like breathing for the first time. I placed my single suitcase on the bed, the one I'd been filling piece by piece during fake gym trips. Ashton tracked every credit card charge, but never questioned why I spent hours working out. Trophy wives needed maintenance, after all. My phone vibrated with a flood of missed calls. 17 already. I deleted his contact, watching the number dissolve into digits. The first voicemail played by accident. "Mila, this is ridiculous. Come home. We'll talk about whatever upset you." His voice was calm, measured, the tone of a man managing a volatile stock, not addressing a wife. By the 5th message, the cracks were showing. "You can't just leave. Half of everything is in both our names. You need my signature too." I deleted them all. Then I poured myself a glass of champagne. That morning now felt like another lifetime. I'd woken at 6 a.m., alone again. Ashton had fallen asleep in his study, surrounded by glowing monitors. I'd stood by our floor-to-ceiling window, watching the city wake beneath me. It was our anniversary, 4 years, but I knew he'd forgotten. On the counter sat another charity lunch invitation. Another event where I'd smile while the wives compared vacation homes and handbags. While searching for our insurance documents in his study, I accidentally knocked over his digital voice recorder. It hit the marble floor, started playing, and my world stopped. She asked to see our investment statements yesterday. I told her they were too complicated, lots of numbers. She actually believed me. Ashton's voice drawled, followed by Nathan's laughter. I could get her to sign over her kidneys and she'd just ask which pen to use. My hands shook as I replayed it. The date was last Tuesday, the same day I'd brought him sushi for lunch. He'd called me the beautiful Mrs. Whitmore while mocking me behind my back. Then came the next words. "That's why this type is perfect. Pretty enough for photos, dumb enough to control, grateful enough to stay quiet. My father taught me, marry beauty, rent intelligence." I stood frozen in that gleaming room, surrounded by his trophies and lies, realizing what I truly was to him, an investment, already depreciating. My gaze fell on a folder labeled Prenuptial Amendments. Inside were documents dated just last month, forged with my signature, adding clauses that would strip me of everything if I abandoned the marriage. Notarized. Filed. Prepared for my eventual disposal. That was the moment something inside me shifted from hurt to clarity. He wasn't just cruel. He was strategic. I was a piece on his chessboard, and he'd already planned the checkmate. Now, from my Ritz suite, I could see our building glowing in the distance. Ashton was probably tearing through drawers looking for clues I'd never leave. He'd find nothing. I hadn't taken his money, only knowledge. Copies of documents, recordings, everything that could unravel him. The war had already begun, and I was done playing the good wife. My phone buzzed again. This time, the name made me pause. Richard Whitmore, his father. The man who'd once introduced me as Ashton's wife. Pretty thing, isn't she? I let the call ring out. Seconds later, a text arrived from Margaret, Richard's longtime secretary. Room 1247, when you're ready to talk. I have 40 years of information you need. For the first time in months, I smiled. Ashton said I wouldn't last a week without him. But he never asked what I'd been doing all those nights he left me alone, or why his father's secretary knew my maiden name. He never suspected that the trophy wife he underestimated had been quietly preparing for her own survival. He thought I'd left my keys in surrender. He didn't realize they were a declaration of war. 3 weeks passed since I walked out of that marble palace and into freedom. The city moved differently now, slower, calmer. Like the world had shifted into focus. Mornings were for trading from my laptop, afternoons for long walks through Central Park, evenings for decoding the files Margaret had begun feeding me, one careful packet at a time. Each document peeled back another layer of corruption buried beneath the Whitmore family's perfect image. Insider trading, bribed auditors, shell companies masking stolen funds. It was worse than I imagined, and Margaret had it all, meticulously recorded since 1982. Today was May 15th, our anniversary. Ashton had called 3 times that morning, sounding controlled, rehearsed. We need to talk, Mila. Just dinner, civilized. Against my better judgment, or maybe because I wanted to see his fear up close. I agreed. At the salon, Celeste combed through my hair with practiced ease. Special occasion? She asked, not realizing how ironic that was. Anniversary dinner, I said, watching my reflection become once again the woman Ashton liked. Polished, understated, expensive-looking. 4 years, right? Congratulations, she chirped. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I'd made the reservation myself at Le Bernardin, his favorite restaurant. I wanted him to think he was in control. The dress was deep sapphire blue, tailored to perfection, the kind of piece his assistant used to order for me without ever asking my size. In my clutch, alongside lipstick and a compact mirror, sat a flash drive with 40 gigabytes of evidence. Margaret's archive. The real reason for tonight's dinner wasn't reconciliation. It was positioning. As I left the salon, my phone buzzed. A message from Ashton. Slight change. Nathan and Diana joining us. Need to discuss Singapore deal. Same time. I stared at the text, biting back a laugh. Our anniversary reduced to a business meeting. Perfect, I typed back, letting him believe I was still predictable. 20 minutes later, another message. Father insists we come to the estate. He's having something catered. 8 p.m. I almost canceled, but curiosity won. I wanted to see the empire up close before I tore it down. Richard Whitmore's estate in Westchester, looked like something out of an old money fairy tale. Sweeping drive, manicured gardens, a house big enough to echo. I recognized the cars parked out front. Nathan's Bentley, Graham's Tesla, 2 other hedge fund partners' Porsches. It wasn't a dinner. It was a council meeting. Patricia, Richard's third wife, 28, younger than me, answered the door. Her smile was brittle. "Mila, you look stunning," she said softly. Her eyes said something else. "Why did you come?" Inside, laughter and the clink of glasses drifted from the sitting room. Ashton was already holding court, whiskey in hand, surrounded by his allies. When his gaze met mine, there was no warmth, only calculation. Then he turned back to Nathan, dismissing me like background music. "The lovely Mila," Richard boomed, stepping forward with a cigar in one hand and bourbon in the other. "Though, I hear you've been a little uncooperative lately." "Bad for business." He kissed my cheek, the condescension thick as his cologne. Margaret appeared with a tray of champagne. Her eyes met mine for just a second, enough to say she knew what this really was. As she handed me a glass, she murmured, "Some anniversaries are about endings, not beginnings." The dining table was set for 12. Lawyers, partners, wives, each a piece in Richard's well-rehearsed theater. I sat where they told me, between Nathan and Graham's wife, facing the massive portrait of Richard's father, the empire's founder. By the second course, Ashton was performing. "Funny story about how Mila and I met," he began smirking. "She wandered into a derivatives conference thinking it was about art derivatives. Asked if hedge funds had to do with gardening. The men laughed. It was fiction, of course. I'd been presenting my graduate thesis that day. But facts never stood in the way of Ashton's narrative. "Thank God for lost puppies," Nathan added. "They make the best pets." Laughter again. I smiled politely, excused myself, and slipped into the corridor. Richard's study door was ajar. His computer glowed, screen unlocked. I stepped inside, heart steady. Password taped to the monitor. Richard 1936. Amateur. His emails were open, revealing months of communications. Insider tips, hush money transfers, offshore accounts. And behind a cheap Monet reproduction on the wall, a safe. I memorized its layout before stepping back out. When I returned, the conversation had shifted to business. Singapore expansion, leveraged returns. The wives stared at their plates while the men discussed millions. Then Nathan, half drunk and smirking, gestured toward me. "You know what Ashton is?" "An empire builder. And Mila here? She's the display case. Beautiful, elegant, ultimately decorative." The laughter that followed sliced through the air. Ashton raised his glass. "Best investment I ever made. Great tax benefits. Minimal maintenance." Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she cleared plates. Her eyes met mine. 40 years of silent fury compressed into a single look. I understood. She was ready. When the final toast ended, I stood, smiled, and left without a word. As I walked out beneath Richard's marble archway, the diamond on my finger caught the light, cold, sharp, refracting every ounce of humiliation into resolve. In the car, I pulled out a cheap flip phone from beneath the seat, a burner I'd bought with cash. One message to the only contact saved. Tuesday, 2 p.m. Jade Garden, Chinatown. Margaret's reply came 5 minutes later. "I'll bring tea." For 3 days, I waited. Trading stocks, keeping routine, pretending to be calm, while every nerve thrummed with anticipation. Ashton stopped calling. His lawyer began sending letters about reconciliation in the interest of financial stability. I shredded them all. Tuesday arrived gray and heavy. The Jade Garden sat squeezed between a funeral home and a discount handbag shop, its windows fogged with decades of steam. Margaret was already there in the back corner, a cardigan draped over her shoulders, looking like anyone's grandmother. But her eyes, those sharp, patient eyes, held more truth than any ledger. She slid a tin of butter cookies across the table. "Twist the lipstick 3 times, then pull," she whispered. Inside, hidden within a lipstick tube, was a flash drive. 16 gigabytes, she said quietly. Started collecting in 1982. Richard's first wife, Elena, knew something was wrong. Then she had her accident. After that, I kept everything. Her hands trembled only once, as she said the word accident. I opened the drive on my laptop that night. Folders appeared, neatly labeled. 1982 to 2003, asset diversion. 2004 to 2015, SEC irregularities. 2016 to present, Whitmore Capital internal. 40 years of secrets. I wasn't just going to survive Ashton. I was going to dismantle the Whitmore dynasty piece by piece, with their own paper trail. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not one of Ashton's high-profile sharks who charged $1,000 an hour to protect guilty men, but someone entirely outside his world. Patricia Kim, a sharp, soft-spoken attorney 2 hours north in Connecticut. Her website was plain, her office above a dentist's clinic, her handshake steady. She didn't care about names like Whitmore. She cared about documentation. "I need to create a company," I told her. "Something small, invisible, and legal." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "What kind of company?" "One that can hold certain assets," I replied, "and disappear if needed." She didn't ask why. By the next day, Phantom Rose Holdings LLC existed on paper, registered in Delaware and Connecticut, with a post office box that led to another shell company that led to nowhere. "Completely legal," Patricia said, sliding the forms across her desk, "but complex enough that it'll take forensic accountants months to trace. By then, you'll have done whatever it is you're planning." "How did you know I'm planning something?" "Because women don't build invisible companies for fun," she said. "They build them for survival." A week later, Ashton left for Singapore. Officially, it was a business trip. Meetings, presentations, expansion plans. In reality, Margaret's files showed it was to move money into offshore accounts. The day he boarded his flight, I told the housekeeper, Maria, to take the week off. "Paid vacation," I said. "You've earned it." She didn't question it. No one ever did. For the first time in years, the penthouse was mine. I locked the doors, turned off the cameras, and started searching. Ashton's study was his temple. Dark wood, expensive whiskey, and secrets. His password, ironically, was our wedding date. I almost laughed. Once I was in, the screen filled with rows of trading data, time-stamped to the minute. At first glance, nothing unusual, but as I compared them to Richard's calendar, his meetings, lunches, charity events, the pattern emerged. Every time Richard met with an executive, Ashton made trades in that company's stock hours later. Classic insider trading, obvious as daylight. I took screenshots, copied files, and uploaded everything to Phantom Rose's encrypted cloud storage. In his locked drawer, I found something worse. Emails between Ashton and Nathan, discussing my mental fragility. They planned to have me evaluated by a psychiatrist Richard knew. one who'd conveniently diagnosed his second wife with psychotic depression before her commitment. "We'll have documentation ready," Ashton had written. "Once she's under observation, we can finalize the transfer." My hand stayed steady as I photographed every page. There was even a folder labeled Exit Strategy. It detailed when to file for divorce, how to claim abandonment, which assets to seize first. My elimination was scheduled like a business transaction. Profit projections included. By midnight, I had everything. When I left his study, I restored every item to its exact position. Ashton would never know I'd been there. He'd come home to the same untouched desk, unaware that his perfect life was now sitting on an encrypted cloud server and in the hands of the woman he called a decoration. The next morning, I went swimming at equinox, trying to quiet the storm inside me. The pool had always been my sanctuary, counting laps, controlling breath, staying invisible. I was halfway through when Diana appeared at the edge of the pool, wrapped in a silk robe, sunglasses hiding her eyes. "Nathan knows," she said quietly, "about Ashton's messages to me. He hired a private investigator, had our phones cloned." I pushed myself out of the water streaming down my arms. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're not safe either," she whispered. "These men don't get angry. They get even." She pulled her glasses down slightly, revealing a bruise on her jaw, faint but unmistakable. "Nathan's moving assets offshore. Richard's been calling judges he golfs with. They know something's coming." Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking on marble, leaving me dripping and wordless. That night, Ashton came home early, with flowers, calla lilies, my least favorite. The gesture was deliberate, the message beneath it sharp as a blade. "Thought we could have dinner together," he said, arranging cheese and pouring Bordeaux like a man in control. His hands, though, trembled faintly. "I've been thinking, maybe we should take a vacation. Montana, maybe? Somewhere quiet, no cell service." His tone was too smooth, a trap disguised as tenderness. "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow, if we can." "You've seemed stressed." He slid a folder toward me. "New insurance papers. Better coverage for both of us. Just sign here." My phone, hidden under the table, photographed each page before I signed, every stroke of my pen recorded. Patricia's encryption app uploaded the images instantly to Phantom Rose. Ashton smiled as I handed back the pen. "You trust me, don't you?" he asked. "Completely," I lied. 3 days later, he picked up my mother from JFK. My mother, who'd always adored Ashton, called that night breathless with joy. "Oh, honey, he's changed." He picked me up himself, carried my bags, even remembered I like gin and tonic. I smiled through my teeth. "He's full of surprises, Mom." That week, Ashton played the perfect son-in-law. Theater tickets, spa days, dinners that cost more than my first year of college. He toasted my mother at dinner, called her the woman who raised the love of my life. I watched him perform, watched her believe it. For the first time, I saw what made him dangerous. Ashton wasn't just cruel. He was charming. He could wear empathy like a suit, tailored perfectly to the occasion. On her last night, Mom sat on my bed, holding my hands. "You've lost weight, sweetheart," she whispered. "And your smile, It looks practiced. Are you happy? Through the doorway, I could see Ashton's shadow lingering in the hallway, listening. I'm exactly where I planned to be, I said, loud enough for him to hear. The next day, Margaret asked to meet at the New York Public Library reading room. It was poetic. Two women surrounded by millions of words that men like Richard never truly read. She spread newspaper clippings across the table, like a history of ghosts. Elena Whitmore, Richard's first wife. Accident on bridge, perfect weather. Caroline, institutionalized for exhaustion. Jennifer, accused of embezzlement, vanished after divorce. Each one blonde, middle class, polished. Each one erased. Why year 4? I asked softly. Long enough to build a pattern. Short enough to dispose quietly, she said. Then she placed a photo in front of me. A young woman, smiling, 22. Madison Hayes. Just graduated from Penn. Richard had lunch with her father last week. She's the next you. I slid the photo into my wallet, behind my old student ID, the one that still bore my real name. For the first time, I wasn't running anymore. I was planning. The next morning, I made my first move. $8,000, withdrawn from our joint account in small amounts at 3 different banks. To the tellers, I was just another wife redecorating, buying jewelry, living a luxury life. The money vanished into Phantom Rose Holdings, disguised as consulting fees for an interior design firm. Patricia had been right. The IRS didn't care what was real, only that the paperwork looked neat. Ashton barely noticed. He was too busy dealing with new compliance issues at the fund. Clients were nervous. Partners whispered. Every day, Margaret slipped me another document. Proof of insider trading, fraudulent audits, offshore accounts. And every night, I uploaded it to Phantom Rose. By the end of the week, I'd moved over $40,000, quietly rebuilding a future he thought I'd never need. When Ashton finally came home early one evening, I knew something had shifted. He looked shaken, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot. Lost the Morrison account today, he muttered, pouring scotch straight into a glass. $40 million in assets, gone. They said there were compliance concerns. Can you believe that? I murmured something sympathetic, watching his reflection in the window. How small he looked now without his arrogance. Nathan thinks someone's talking to our clients, he said, pacing. He says there are rumors of an SEC probe. Ridiculous, of course. He drained the glass and poured another. The following day, I withdrew $12,000, then $15,000. Spa treatments, I told one teller who glanced up. She smiled knowingly, assuming my husband was footing the bill. If only she knew. Ashton's decline was rapid. The man who'd once controlled boardrooms now stumbled through evenings, half drunk, half terrified. Calls poured in from partners, lawyers, investors. He'd spend hours shouting behind closed doors, then collapse in silence. Each time he signed another set of routine papers, his hand shook a little more. Each time, I captured the signature with my hidden camera. Insurance policies, power of attorney, transfers he never read. One Thursday morning, Patricia called from a number I didn't recognize. The FBI's contacted me, she said, voice low and urgent. They know you're my client. My pulse jumped. How? Richard's been under investigation for 18 months. A former employee filed a whistleblower complaint. The agents have enough to move, but they need corroboration. They want to talk to you. She paused. Mila, If you're going to act, it has to be now. Once they go public, all assets will freeze. That night, Ashton poured his 6th drink before dinner, muttering about betrayal and loyalty. His eyes were wild. "You've been different lately," he slurred. "Too calm." I smiled faintly. "Therapy," I lied. "Learning to accept what I can't change." He laughed bitterly. "Good. You're finally learning." Saturday came, and with it, the monthly women's luncheon at the Riverside Country Club, a nest of polished vipers led by Helen Brennan. Normally, I endured these gatherings with mechanical smiles, but today, something inside me snapped. Helen spotted me the moment I arrived. "Mila, darling," she cooed, loud enough for the room to hear. "Still playing with those little investment apps?" So cute when wives have hobbies. The laughter around us was automatic, rehearsed. I set down my teacup and smiled sweetly. "Actually, Helen, my portfolio is up 340% this year. How's yours doing?" The laughter died instantly. Helen blinked. What?" "Oh, I thought you'd know," I continued. "Your husband's pharmaceutical company lost its patent appeal last month. I shorted it. Made a killing." Gasps rippled through the table. Helen's lips parted in shock. "Well," I added, stirring sugar into my tea, "some of us play with pretend portfolios. Some of us prefer the real thing." Margaret, serving tea at the edge of the room, hid a small, proud smile. For the first time, I saw the shift, the wives realizing I wasn't the fool they thought I was. That night, Ashton heard about it. By morning, Richard would too. I didn't care. The empire was already shaking, and I was ready to watch it burn. Wednesday morning, the explosion came. My phone lit up with a headline, "Diana Whitmore files for divorce." Attached were public court filings and leaked emails, infidelity, hidden accounts, fraud. She'd gone nuclear, and the fallout was immediate. Ashton called me 17 times before I picked up. "What did you tell her?" he demanded. "Tell who?" I said calmly. "Diana!" "Nathan thinks I leaked information. He says you must have said something at dinner." His voice cracked with rage. "You destroyed everything!" I heard something crash in his office. "You always thought you were smarter than everyone else," he spat. "Well, congratulations. You've destroyed us both." Then the line went dead. An hour later, Margaret texted. "Richard called an emergency meeting. The empire is cracking." I stared at the words, feeling the tremor of justice rumbling through decades of silence. The empire wasn't cracking. It was collapsing. By evening, I was wearing a red wig and cheap sunglasses, dressed in an outfit no Whitmore woman would ever touch. Polyester dress, scuffed heels. Nathan's office on Madison Avenue had security that looked impressive but wasn't. I'd been there dozens of times. I knew the guards' routines. Knew that Nathan's assistant always left for sushi at 12:30. At 12:45, I slipped into the elevator and rode to the 42nd floor. In my purse, a manila envelope held the final blow. Ashton's private emails mocking Nathan, plotting to steal his clients, even calculating how much Diana's wealth would add to his assets after a planned divorce. I slid the envelope under Nathan's office door and walked away. 3 hours later, Margaret forwarded me an email from Ashton's assistant. Partnership dissolution effective immediately. The words were beautiful. Nathan had just ended a 20-year alliance. That night, I checked into the Warwick Hotel under my maiden name. The room was small but clean. I sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and dialed the number Patricia had given me. After 12 rings, a woman's voice answered. Securities and Exchange Commission, Enforcement Division. I need to report systematic insider trading at Whitmore Capital, I said. I have 5 years of documented evidence, trades timed to non-public information, falsified audits, and 40 years of supporting documentation. The agent asked questions, technical, precise. I answered every one. Why are you coming forward now, Mrs. Whitmore? She asked finally. I looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline. Because staying silent makes me complicit, I said. And because they're about to destroy another woman the way they tried to destroy me. After the call, I made 3 copies of Margaret's data. One for a safety deposit box at Chase, one at Bank of America, and one for Patricia's office safe, each with the same instruction. If anything happens to me, release everything to the FBI, the SEC, and the New York Times simultaneously. By dawn, Richard's black Mercedes rolled into our building's garage. I watched from the window as he stormed into Ashton's study. Their voices rose like thunder through the walls. You promised the wives were handled, Richard shouted. Said Mila was too stupid to understand what she signed. She is, Ashton yelled. She doesn't even know how to read a financial statement. I entered with a coffee tray, perfectly composed. Cream? I asked sweetly. They ignored me. Find the leak, Richard growled. Fix it, or we're all finished. They worked until 2 a.m, shredding documents, calling lawyers, drowning in panic. By 3, Ashton passed out in his chair, drooling on the papers that had once made him powerful. I stood at the door, watching the empire crumble around him. Then I did what I'd done the night this began. Placed my keys on the granite counter. House, car, safe. Beside them, a single note. Check your accounts. At 3 a.m., I walked out of the penthouse for the last time. The October air hit cold and clean against my face. For the first time, I didn't look back. By the time dawn broke, I was already settled in a small suite at the Warwick Hotel. The room smelled faintly of old wood and expensive soap, nothing like the sterile marble of the penthouse. I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the skyline wake up. Manhattan shimmered with possibility, unaware that one of its wealthiest empires was about to implode. At exactly 7 a.m., I opened my laptop. The accounts page refreshed with a satisfying click. Every transfer Patricia had set in motion had gone through. $17 million. Half of everything Ashton had once flaunted was now legally mine. He'd built those walls of wealth with arrogance, convinced that a prenup made him untouchable. But in his arrogance, he'd also ensured I was co-owner on every account for tax optimization. He'd given me the keys to my own escape. At 7:03 a.m., my phone lit up. Ashton's photo, the confident grin from our wedding day, glowed on the screen. I let it ring. Then again. Then again. By the 9th missed call, I turned on my voice recorder and played each voicemail aloud, documenting his unraveling. First message. Mila, there's a mistake. The bank says, there's an error with our accounts. Call me back. Fourth message. This isn't funny. We need to fix this before the markets open. 11th message. What did you do? What did you do? 28th message. Please. You're destroying everything we built. 35th message. The FBI is here, Mila. God, please answer. By noon, the mighty Ashton Whitmore was begging. By evening, I was eating salmon in my hotel room, watching the news like any other viewer. The headline appeared just before 6 p.m. Hedge fund titan Richard Whitmore arrested in federal raid. The screen filled with flashing lights, suited agents, and the sight of Richard himself being led out of his mansion in handcuffs. His face, usually smooth and imperious, looked stunned. Margaret's quiet persistence had finally come to fruition. I texted her one emoji, a champagne bottle. Her reply came seconds later. We did it. Over the next 3 weeks, the empire collapsed publicly. Partners fled. Investors withdrew. The media swarmed. Margaret and I met with federal agents, handing over the files, the recordings, the paper trails. I gave them everything. Ashton's voice memos, Richard's emails, Nathan's secret transfers. Each piece slotted neatly into the case the FBI had been building for nearly 2 years. Nathan fled to Switzerland. Graham Chen cut a deal within 48 hours, turning on Richard to save himself. By the time the indictments were unsealed, Whitmore Capital Management had been gutted. And then, one evening, Ashton found me. I was sitting at the Ritz-Carlton bar, drinking champagne paid for with my own earnings. I saw him in the mirror before he reached me, a ghost of the man I once married. His eyes were hollow, his jaw rough with stubble, his expensive suit wrinkled. He stopped a foot from my stool, clutching a glass like a lifeline. You destroyed everything, he said. I turned to him slowly. No, I said. I revealed everything. He leaned closer, voice breaking. We had a life. You had a life, I corrected. I had a role. His fingers twitched, desperate to grab my wrist, but I leaned back just far enough. You said I wouldn't last a week without you, I said, my tone calm, almost gentle. It's been 21 days. And you're the one who looks like he's drowning. You don't understand, he muttered. My father, he's facing 20 years. The firm, everything is exactly what you built it to be, I said softly. A house of cards. He started to raise his voice, his anger reigniting like an old habit. You stupid! The bartender, a woman about Margaret's age, stepped between us. Sir, you're disturbing our guests. He turned on her, sputtering. Do you know who I am? Someone who needs to leave, she said coolly. Within minutes, hotel security guided him out. The bar fell quiet again. The bartender placed another glass of champagne before me. On the house, she said with a knowing smile. That was long overdue. 2 days later, I was called to testify. So was Diana. We sat together in the courthouse hallway, not speaking, but sharing a quiet understanding. When Margaret took the stand, she didn't tremble once. For 3 days she testified, detailing 4 decades of corruption. Wives destroyed, partners bribed, millions laundered. When the prosecutor asked why she'd kept every document, she looked directly at Richard and said, Because I knew one day someone would be brave enough to use them. Someone like Miss Hawthorne. The courtroom went silent. The prosecutor corrected her automatically. You mean Mrs. Whitmore? Margaret smiled faintly. No, I mean Miss Hawthorne. She took back her name. She took back everything. That night, Patricia called me. It's over, she said. Richard will never see daylight again. Ashton's facing 15 to 20. When the official divorce hearing came, the courtroom was packed with reporters. Ashton looked like a shadow of himself, his famous composure replaced by bitter exhaustion. His lawyer tried one last argument. Your Honor, my client's wife benefited from these alleged crimes. She lived in luxury on ill-gotten gains. Patricia stood calmly. Your Honor, may I play a recording? Ashton's own voice filled the courtroom. She wouldn't understand a financial statement if I drew her pictures. That's the beauty of marrying someone decorative. Judge Catherine Chin looked directly at him. Mr. Whitmore, it appears you were wrong about your wife's intelligence. Perhaps if you'd respected it, we wouldn't be here. When I signed the decree, I wrote my maiden name, Mila Hawthorne, each stroke reclaiming a piece of myself. Patricia smiled. You've got enough to rebuild anything you want, she said. What will you do next? Margaret was waiting for me in the lobby, wearing a new navy suit instead of her old uniform. Together we walked 2 blocks to a modest building that once housed Ashton's firm. A small sign hung on the glass door, the Phoenix Foundation, rising from the ashes. Inside were 4 small offices, sunlight spilling across empty desks. A foundation for women who've been silenced, Margaret explained softly. Victims of powerful men who think they can't fight back. That afternoon, our first client arrived, a nervous young woman named Jennifer Chin. My husband says I'm paranoid, she whispered, clutching a folder. That I wouldn't understand the science anyway. Margaret took her hand gently. Every document tells a story, she said. We'll help you write a new ending. Weeks later, my mother flew in for Thanksgiving. She stood in the doorway of my new Brooklyn apartment, smiling through tears. You look lighter, she said. Happier. I'm free, I told her. Maybe that's the same thing. We cooked together. Burnt turkey, perfect stuffing, laughter echoing through a kitchen half the size of the old one, but infinitely warmer. 6 months after I left the penthouse, I returned only once, to sign papers for its sale. The rooms were empty now, hollow shells of a life that never truly belonged to me. Through the window, I saw Madison Hayes, the young woman Richard once targeted, walking down the street, hand in hand with a man her own age. Safe. Unscarred. Margaret called that morning. We have a new case, she said. A senator's wife. She's ready to talk. Then let's help her, I said, looking out over the city that had once caged me. One woman at a time. I dropped the keys on the counter, the last relics of my old life, and walked away for good. This time, the sound didn't echo with loss. It sounded like victory. If Mila's journey from silence to power inspired you, hit the like button, share this story with someone who needs courage, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life tales of strength, justice, and second chances. Tell me in the comments, which moment of Mila's story hit you the hardest?